It all started with a sound. A sound I hadn't heard for what felt like a lifetime. The loud, angry shriek of a rusty padlock finally giving up. That clank, it wasn't just a lock opening. It was the beginning of this whole unbelievable story about my family, a shed my sister called trash, and an absolutely incredible secret my father left behind for me. My name is Chelsea, and I'm going to tell you how this place, this building that my sister literally laughed at, turned out to be the key to everything. It's really a story about what we think we see versus what's actually there. So, there we were. My sister, Portia, she grabs the $100,000 in cash, and she doesn't just take it, she laughs. She actually laughed out loud as I was handed the key to what she called a shabby storage shed. And her laugh, it was so sharp, so full of contempt. It was the sound of her winning. She thought she'd won. But here's the thing she could never, ever understand. Our father, he knew her. He knew exactly who she was. He knew her greed, her carelessness. He was counting on it. He knew she would never, ever think to look past the surface. To really get what happened in that lawyer's office, you kind of have to understand our family. It was almost a cliche, right? The story of two sisters who couldn't be more different. We were on two completely separate tracks in life. One was this glittering path, all about appearances and what you could get from people. The other path, that was my path. It was simpler, quieter, a path of duty, of care, of a love that really didn't ask for anything in return. So the reading of the will, that wasn't where we split apart. Oh no, that was just the moment it all became official. Right, so I'm Chelsea, and for the last year of my dad's life, my entire world pretty much shrunk down to the four walls of his small, quiet house. And listen, it wasn't a sacrifice, not at all. It was a privilege. I was the one who got to know the rhythm of his breathing, who sat with him for hours on end, reading his favorite old history books aloud. In that final year, I didn't just take care of him, I really saw him. I saw the brilliant man he'd always been. It was an incredibly sad year, of course, but it was also a year of this deep, profound connection. A gift, really. A gift of time that I wouldn't trade for $1 billion. So while my whole world was inside Dad's house, my sister Portia's, hers was 100 miles and 1,000,000 worlds away. She was always the golden child, married to some big shot CEO. Her life was this perfectly arranged Instagram feed of parties and success. While I was memorizing Dad's medication schedule, she was complaining that the drive to visit was too expensive. And we're not talking about gas money here. For Portia, her time was just too valuable to waste on a dying man. For me, that last year was this sacred duty. For her, it was just an inconvenience. The day we went to the lawyer's office to hear the will, it just felt so strange. The air in that room was so heavy you could almost taste it. I felt, just small and completely worn out by grief. But Portia, she walked in like she was there to close a business deal, dressed head to toe in some designer black outfit, tapping away at her phone. She wasn't there to mourn our father. Nope, she was there to collect. And my mother? She just sat there between us like a ghost, completely silent. The Cold War that had been our relationship for years was about to go nuclear. The lawyer hadn't even finished the first sentence before Portia just cut him right off. Her voice was so crisp, so empty. No emotion at all, except this unbelievable sense of entitlement. I'll take the cash. She just announced it like it was a fact of nature. Then she looked right at me, this little smirk playing on her lips. I'm the oldest. And with a flick of her hand, she sealed my fate. Chelsea can have the rest, she said. The tools, the junk, you can have the dirty shack out back. The words just hung there in the silence. It wasn't just about taking the money. She was actually enjoying throwing me the scraps. In that exact moment, my head snapped toward my mother. I was just begging with my eyes for anything, a word, a sigh, a shake of her head, something to show she disagreed. But there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. She just stared at some spot on the wall across the room, her face completely blank. And her silence, wow, it was louder than a scream. She let her do it. She basically signed off on the whole cruel performance. And right then, it stopped being about the money. It was about realizing in this horrible, sinking way that I was completely and utterly alone in this. As the lawyer, who was clearly flustered but obviously not about to argue with Portia, started scribbling notes to change the paperwork, something inside me just shifted. The hurt started to turn into this cold, hard clarity. I looked over at my sister, who was already back on her phone, probably setting up a lunch reservation, and I finally got it. I mean, I really got it. To her, our father wasn't a memory. He was an estate, a number. His passing wasn't a tragedy. It was just the closing of an account, a final transaction, and you can't reason with a transaction. So, I walked out of that office with one single old key in my hand, the key to the shed. For a few days, I couldn't even look at it. I just couldn't face this symbol of what I'd been left with. But then, this little flicker of curiosity started to grow, because my dad, he was a careful man, a man of details and plans. He wasn't a junk collector. And the more I thought about it, the more Portia's smug dismissal just felt wrong. Her greed, her laser focus on the cash, it was like a pair of blinders. And it made her overlook the one thing that mattered most, who our father really was. Portia was gone before the ink on the new papers was even dry. The money hit her account, and that was that. She never came back to the house, not once. And in her rush, in her absolute lack of curiosity about anything that didn't have a dollar sign attached to it, she made the biggest mistake of her life. She never even went inside the shed. It never occurred to her that it could be anything more than a place for rusty rakes. She was so sure she was the smart one that she never even bothered to just walk around to the back. So what did she miss? What secret could this plain, fallen apart old shed possibly be hiding? I have to be honest, I tried to keep my hopes in check. I really did. I was trying to protect myself from any more disappointment. I thought, maybe he hid a couple $100 in an old paint can or something. But I just couldn't shake this feeling that my dad, the man who loved puzzles and riddles, had left me one last one to solve. Maybe it was a test, a test of patience he knew only one of his daughters could ever pass. When I finally unlocked that door and went inside, the air was just thick with the smell of old wood and motor oil. It smelled like my dad, and over in the corner was his favorite shovel, the handle all worn smooth from his hands. I picked it up and something felt weird. There was a little rattle inside. On a whim, I twisted the wooden grip at the top, and I swear, my heart stopped. It unscrewed. And inside, wrapped up in a little piece of oiled cloth, were two small, ornate brass keys. My heart was just hammering in my chest as I started feeling along the back wall, and behind some old 2x4s, my fingers found it. A tiny, almost invisible keyhole. A hidden door. The first key fit. It turned with this soft little click, and a whole section of the wall just swung inwards, revealing a room I never ever knew existed. And this wasn't just some closet. It was a proper vault with reinforced walls. And right there, in the middle of the floor, bolted down, was this huge black iron safe, the kind you see in old movies. I just stood there staring, and it all clicked into place. The shed wasn't the inheritance. The shed was the camouflage. It was a fortress disguised as a junk heap. Okay, so my shock pretty quickly turned into a whole new problem. How in the world was I going to open this thing? The second key, it fit a tiny lock right below the main combination dial. But it didn't open the door. Instead, a tiny little drawer popped out. And inside that drawer was a folded up piece of paper. On it was a string of numbers and letters. It was the serial number from the very first watch he ever gave me for my 16th birthday. A number only I would know. My hands were shaking so badly, but I spun that heavy dial. Click, click, click. I pulled the handle, and the massive door swung open. The light from the shed poured into this velvet-lined space, and I literally couldn't breathe. It wasn't cash. It was something so much more incredible. There were dozens of rare, vintage watches, each one a tiny work of art. I saw names I'd only read about in magazines. Patek Philippe, Rolex. My father, this quiet, unassuming man, had been secretly, carefully building this collection his entire life. It was his passion, his quiet investment. I had it appraised later on. The total value was it was insane. $500,000. But honestly, it wasn't even about the money. Not really. Each one of those watches, it represented a story, a choice, a lifetime of discipline. But then I saw it. Sitting right on the top shelf was a plain white envelope, and written on it was just my name, Chelsea. I opened it up. The note inside was so short, but it meant everything. All it said was, "You were the one who valued my time, so I saved all of mine for you. I love you, Dad." And that was it. That's when I finally just broke down and cried. Not out of sadness, but out of this overwhelming feeling of being seen. He saw me. He always had. You'd think that would be the end of the story, right? A nice, happy ending? Well, you'd be wrong. Because greed, as it turns out, has a way of coming back to bite you. Of course, Portia found out. Some family friend mentioned offhand that I'd had some good luck with Dad's old stuff. And that's all it took. She just could not handle the idea of me ending up with something valuable. She couldn't stand being wrong. So her mind, which only thinks in terms of transactions, saw only one option. She had to take it. Her downfall was almost comical in a really tragic way. She drove to the house in the middle of the night, broke into the shed, and when she saw that massive immovable safe, she must have just lost it. The police said she tried to pry it open with a crowbar. When that didn't work, she tried to physically push the 1,000-pound safe over. And as she was shoving it, this enormous thing overbalanced, and it fell, pinning her leg to the concrete floor. The neighbors heard her screaming, called the cops, and they found her literally trapped by the very treasure she was trying to steal. Getting arrested for breaking and entering was really just the start of her life completely falling apart. The story, of course, got out, and the humiliation for her and her husband was total. Her CEO husband, whose entire life revolved around appearances, couldn't handle the scandal. He filed for divorce. And that's when the final secret came out. Portia's whole fancy lifestyle, it was a house of cards. She was drowning in tens of thousands of dollars of debt from buying designer everything. She wasn't trying to get richer by stealing from me. She was just trying to keep from going under. You know, when you really boil this whole crazy story down, it's about one thing: true value. My sister spent her whole life chasing the shiny surface of things. She looked at a dirty shack and saw nothing. My dad, though, he understood that the things that matter most aren't always put on display. They're protected. The real value wasn't just the watches, it was the love and the care and the planning that went into them. True value? It's not what you see on the surface. It's what's kept safe inside the vault. So as we wrap this up, it really leaves you with a question, doesn't it? I mean, Portia's mistake was huge and dramatic, but don't we all make smaller versions of that mistake all the time? We judge a person by their clothes, or an opportunity by how it looks at first glance. My father's real gift to me wasn't the money. It was a lesson in how to see. A reminder to always walk around to the back, to look for the hidden door. and to appreciate the people and the things that don't shout about how important they are. So the question I'll leave you with is this: what hidden value are you overlooking in your own life?